Welcome back to another edition of The Road to 100 with Black AI Media. I'm Cedric Scott Jr., and we have another spectacular guest here today to talk about amazing work in the space. Definitely some awesome business savvy. So I'm interested to learn some good information here. Definitely in kind of like the marketing and branding spaces, and I always take a couple of tips whenever I hear you talk and the things that you share online. So I'm looking forward to getting to that. But I want to open up space. We have Jeneba Wint here with us, and I want to just open up for an opportunity for you to give us a little intro, and then we'll get into our question.
Thanks, Cedric. Thank you for having me. As you know, my name is Jeneba Wint, and I am the founder of Bloomology and Soft Life Engineering. Bloomology is a personal branding consultancy, and we're doing a lot of work in the personal branding space. We have our Chat GPT, Bloomy Brand GPT, which is a personal branding assistant through AI, through Chat GPT. And then Soft Life Engineering is my corporate wellness company, and also it teaches AI literacy for Black women and BIPOC women. And so in that space, we are using AI to empower women to it kind of like soft life your way into AI. So how you could use AI for wellness and mindset and that kind of work, and how you can use it to basically live a softer life. That's the goal. One of my slogans or something I always say in that space is get somebody else to do it, and that's AI. So it can help you to just kind of take off that cognitive load, some of that stress, some of that hard work that you may not have to do because you can get AI to do it. So that's kind of sums up all the work that I'm doing in AI. I'm a personal branding strategist and architect, and that's the work that I do.
I want to go into our driving question related to what's happening in tech and the AI space in particular, in alignment with the work that you're doing. What does narrative mean to you?
That's such a great question. So narrative is story. That's what narrative means to me. Everything from an origin story to the story that people tell about you. So when I think of narrative, I automatically think of personal branding because that's in my mind or in the work that I do, the way that you own your narrative, right? And so narrative to me is just the story, your own story, and then the story that people tell about you. So it's a little bit of legacy, but a little bit of story at the same time.
And related to some of that, because we're talking about branding, we're talking about supports for women, entrepreneurship, a lot of those components. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, though, and how
Yeah.
you really ventured into more of the tech and AI space? Like, how did you get started, and what led you to where you are today with creating those corporate entities and businesses that you set up?
That's a great question. So, just tying it all back to narrative, I think that my narrative going into tech and my mindset going into tech was to approach it from an entrepreneurship standpoint. That's kind of my always been my narrative in tech. And when I say that, I mean like I'm the brand, right? Like it's not Microsoft or I work at Microsoft or I'm proud to work at Google, whatever. It's like I'm Jennifer. This is what I do. This is a skill set that I bring. This is how much you need to pay me for said skill set. And so that's kind of like how I've always approached my career. And that's been my narrative. And I'll just go back to how I started. I actually don't come from a tech background, a traditional tech background, I would say. I do come from a tech background a little bit. I have this picture next to me on my desk. So that's me at like 3. You can see that big back computer right there and that big back printer. So I've kind of always been exposed to technology, into technology. I was a huge gamer, but I didn't even know that there was a tech career. Like when I was in high school, going to college, I didn't know that this is what people were doing for their job. I wasn't really exposed in that way. I had been a user exposed, but I had not been, and I had been like building stuff, taking stuff apart, I was always that person that's like, can you set up my computer? Like when we got on college campus, like, can you set the computer up for me? I should have been charging for that, but I didn't even know that that was a job. But I actually was a poli sci major, so I was going to be a lawyer when I first started, I guess, like going to school and all that stuff. And then I went into architecture school because I was going to be an urban planner. And then the recession happened, and I didn't know what I was going to do because I couldn't find a job. And I was working at Zara with a whole master's degree. So I literally just one night was like, well, what can I do with this degree? Went on Google. Google gave me a whole list of what can you do with this degree. One of the things that came up was technical writing. I was like, I know I could do that. Like, I'm already doing that. I read a job description. Then I just finessed my resume into a technical writing resume. And I literally started from there. That's my start in technology is technical writing on product team, dev team. I actually didn't even start in tech. I started technical writing in oil and gas industry because I was living in Houston at the time. And then I figured out that that's a skill that's going to be that's like in any industry. Like all industries have a form of technical writing, whether that's like science, healthcare, tech, whatever. And so then I just pivoted it into tech. But that's how I started.
It's always interesting to hear from folks who might not necessarily have a formal, we'll call it tech background or degrees or experience, and to hear how, in most cases, I've heard those same people learn more practically to leverage technology to actually move themselves forward. So I think there's something to that, and I really appreciate you breaking that down and sharing, because I think there's a lot of learnings that people can take from just hearing that segment of your story. And I wanted to go back into and thinking about kind of your motivation, because you mentioned you were at a point where you said, well, what can I do with this degree? Right, your master's degree, and you basically did a Google search, and I'm assuming, of course, that this is pre Chat GPT, where you
Oh,
couldn't just
this
go in.
is this is when we only had Google, okay? Like we didn't we the AI was there, but like the average consumer, we didn't have AI. So just straight up Google search and putting it in. So yeah, you're on the right track.
So I think related to that, what might be helpful for some of the listeners as well is I think the motivation behind taking that initiative, and then from there going to not necessarily, I think, even building on your work as a technical writer, but tell us a little bit about the motivation to propel yourself, and ultimately, how did that aspect of what you're doing come to life, going from how do I use my degree to land myself a role in this world, but then also how do I become somebody who really takes up space?
Yeah. So it's so funny because I went to a tech networking event last night, and people were asking questions and talking about like how do I get in, and some people were talking about like just sharing, swapping career stories and stuff like that. And I think the motivation is really just from that Google search. I started seeing salaries like there was still stuff like Indeed, salary.com, whatever. So I started seeing like in that research how much people in technology were making and then how much people not in technology were making. And so I already knew what it's like to be broke, right? With a degree. So I'm like, I'm not going to be broke. I'm going to choose something that's lucrative and that's also I would say always going to be around. And so that was really the motivation for me choosing technology out of all the fields that Google was giving me and all the industries that it was giving me was that I know that I can use my skill set here. I also know that I could make an impact here. I also know that this is like a longevity play because I'm always going to be able to get a job or work somewhere or get paid a high amount of money for this skill set. Also, knowing that I was kind of coming in seeing as entry level, even though I already know that I wasn't an entry level person because I had 2 degrees and I had worked before going into technology or making that pivot. So also I was looking at like where can I work that's entry level, but I still can get respect as a person coming in here new. I also can get paid a high amount of money as a person coming in here new. So that was part of my thinking too. It's like positioning, also going back to branding. I think like I always had that branding mindset, even though I didn't even know it was branding. Choosing a field, figuring out how your skill set can work over here, over here, over here, positioning yourself. I always like those are principles of branding, but I didn't know that's what I was doing. But that's kind of like always been a part of how I approach things.
Got it. And was there a single defining moment, or because we've talked a little bit about your pathway and trajectory and how some of those decisions you made to establish yourself and move in a certain way, even if you were going into entry level positions or opportunities, there was still a framing as you laid it out, as in terms of understanding branding without really understanding branding as it's formal. Was there a defining moment though in your career, ultimately, regardless of whether that was within working at a company or choosing to work for yourself, or build your own entity, was there a time that you really realized the potential that the work that you were doing, of that impact that you could have related to the sphere of tech and AI?
So my career is a little bit different, and so I introduced myself saying that I always thought of it like an entrepreneur, but that's because I was forced to. So I started as a contractor, freelancing and contracting at the same time. And so I think whereas that used to be framed as a bad thing too. I didn't start like full-time benefits. I think when people start that way, it's nothing wrong with it, but when people's career goes that way, they're more, I would say, aligned to the company that they work for, or they're not thinking about personal branding. They're more thinking about like, I work at Microsoft, so I'm good. Or I work at Airbnb, so I'm good. My ticket is written. Whereas for me, I had to always think like that because I had to pitch myself because I was a contractor. So if those that don't know, contracting and freelancing in tech is also very lucrative, but you work on a contractual basis. So you might be signed up to work for like a 12-month contract or a 24-month contract, 18 months, 6 months, whatever. But you go through a middleman, an agency, or a consulting company, and then they place you at, like Wells Fargo or Bank of America, Microsoft, whatever. So you're technically like not working there, but you are working there. So I leveraged those names to build my career, but then I was also still building my personal brand because I couldn't really say that I worked at Google. Like I would like take that name or wherever I worked and put it on my resume, but then like when I was online, I would always be like leading with my personal brand, my company. And so I think that was the defining moment, is me starting off as a contractor and then having opportunities that way. I think that kind of propelled me to where I am now, is because I was always thinking of I am the business, I am the brand. So that's kind of like what started me on this whole entrepreneurial thing, is that I always kind of had my own thing on the side while working. And then I think I was with this major contracting, or if you freelance, you probably heard of like a company is called Aquient. When I started working with them, they were like, you should probably do UX. Like your skill set is aligned with that. The way you think is aligned with that. I had never heard of it. This is like, I don't know, 15 years ago. And so this is at a time when like tech is really Now it's a whole different ball game. But like you could literally finesse your way into tech. Not saying you can't do it now, but it was a lot easier then because there was a lot less people working in tech. So they said I should get into UX. So I said, okay. So they have like a lot of upskilling opportunities. I just took all their classes, learned about UX. I started positioning myself for like content strategist, UX writer, more jobs that were in UX. And then I got one and I haven't looked back since. I just was like, from that day, I was like, I'm an expert in UX. I just grew from there, and I worked in UX and product ever since, like in the UX, in the tech space formally. But outside, I was always keeping myself up on what was going on in the tech space, and that's how I knew about AI. Is because I didn't just like stay at my day job. I'm good. I work in tech. I'm good. Like that was never my mindset. It was always like, I have to be up on whatever's going on because this company could lay me off. This contract could be over. I always had to think of what was next because I was a contractor. So I was always like, well, what's next? I might be working at this job on this project, this company, but I need to know what's next for myself. And so I think that's always been key for me and a defining moment for me, how I've been able to move so freely in my career as like owning my narrative or as an entrepreneur while working like a corporate entrepreneur is because I've had to always think like that. What's next? What's coming? What skills should I be learning next? What should I be looking into? Especially as someone who doesn't have a technical background, didn't do computer science, don't have any type of technical degree. I also, up until this year, never had any certs either. So I always had to like be on it because I'm coming from that perspective.
Wait, don't go anywhere. If you're loving this conversation, we've got so much more waiting for you at blackaimedia.com. That's right, you can catch the full interview with even more insights, stories, and perspectives from our guest. At Black AI Media, we're all about celebrating the innovators, disruptors, and visionaries from the Black global community who are shaping the future of tech and AI. We're talking game-changing ideas, powerful voices, and exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. So, if you're ready to keep the inspiration flowing and dive deeper, head over to blackaimedia.com right now. Don't miss out on the full experience. We'll see you there.